I had always thought life was predictable, shaped by routines and rules I never dared to break. I woke each morning in the same small apartment on the edge of the city, sunlight seeping through half-closed blinds, illuminating dust motes that danced lazily in the air. The scent of coffee bitter, sharp, grounding filled the kitchen as I prepared my breakfast, my hands moving on autopilot. Outside, the streets were alive with the usual chaos. Cars honking, distant sirens, the occasional shout from someone rushing to nowhere in particular. Ordinary. Safe. But ordinary had a way of hiding the truth until it hit you like a storm. I was a woman of habits. And yet, habits could not protect me from the unease that had been creeping into my life for weeks. It began subtly, a shadow lingering at the edge of the woods near my apartment, flickering like a memory I couldn't place. At first I dismissed it. Trees cast strange shapes in the moonlight, and the wind played tricks on the imagination. But sometimes the shadow moved differently. It was too fluid, too deliberate to be natural. I would catch it in my peripheral vision, frozen mid-step, and when I turned fully, it vanished, leaving only the cold bite of air and the feeling that I was being watched. I tried to shrug it off. Perhaps it was stress. Perhaps I was imagining things. After all, I had a wedding to attend in just a few days. A union I had entered out of obligation rather than love. My husband, well, technically my husband, though he had made it painfully clear I was just a wife on paper, was a man whose reputation filled the tabloids and whispers in every corner of the city. A Mafia boss, untouchable and ruthless. His presence alone commanded attention and fear. I had met him only twice before the marriage was finalized. Both times he was distant, polite in a formal way, but there was an edge to him, a coiled tension that made my stomach twist. On the night before our wedding, sleep refused me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic ticking of the old clock on my nightstand. That same shadow returned in my dreams. Not in the form of a dream you could dismiss, a simple fantasy or fleeting image, but in a way that felt almost alive. It moved along the edge of a forest, eyes glowing faintly, watching, waiting. And then, for the briefest instant, I felt it. A presence in the room, real and tangible, brushing the back of my mind with a whisper I could not understand. I bolted upright, heart hammering. The room was empty. Moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating familiar furniture, the worn rug under my bed, the stack of books I had abandoned for weeks. Nothing was out of place. Nothing moved. And yet, the unease lingered, heavy in my chest, whispering that this was not imagination, that something or someone was there, just beyond sight, waiting. The following morning, I stepped outside. The crisp autumn air cutting through my thin coat. Leaves rustled in the wind, scattering across the sidewalk like flickering flames. I walked to the nearby park, hoping the exercise would calm my mind. But the shadows followed me. I noticed them in reflections shapes, bending unnaturally in the water of the fountain, branches arching as though reaching for something. Someone. Every time I thought I had lost them, I felt a prickling sensation along my spine, a signal that eyes were tracking my every movement. As I rounded a bend in the path, I froze. There, among the trees, was a figure, tall, impossibly still, with a presence that made the hair on my arms stand on end. I could not see a face clearly, but the way it stood, the slow, deliberate way it watched me, made my pulse race. I swallowed hard, telling myself it was just another jogger, someone pausing to catch their breath. But there was no sign of movement, no familiar clothing, no sound except the faint rustling of leaves. It was too quiet, too controlled. I stepped back, heart pounding. And then, as if noticing me for the first time, The figure tilted its head slightly. I felt it then, a wave of emotion, foreign and intense. Fear, yes, but also curiosity, an almost magnetic pull I could not resist. My knees wobbled. I wanted to run, but my feet seemed rooted to the ground. And then, as quickly as it had appeared, the figure was gone. Just a blur among the trees, leaving me alone, breathless, and more unsettled than ever. I returned home, trying to rationalize what I had seen. Perhaps it was a trick of the light, an animal, even a reflection of my own stress. But the feeling lingered, and I knew, deep down, that my life was about to change in ways I could not yet imagine. There was a storm gathering, and I was standing directly in its path. That night, I lay awake again, listening to the wind scratching at the windows. My thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Heart in my throat, I approached cautiously. "Hello?" My voice trembled more than I wanted. No answer came, only silence. I opened the door slowly, expecting an empty hallway. Nothing. The apartment was still, quiet, unremarkable. And then I felt a shift in the air. Subtle but undeniable. A presence, heavy and commanding, like someone stepping into the room without making a sound. I spun around, heart racing, to find nothing. My breath came in shallow bursts. And yet, I knew I was not alone. That was when I realized it. Something had changed. Something was watching, waiting, and I was no longer just an ordinary woman living an ordinary life. The shadow, the presence, the pull in my chest, they were all warnings, signs that my world was about to become something else entirely. Something dangerous, something extraordinary. I pressed my back to the wall, trying to steady myself. The hairs on my neck stood on end. And in that moment, as the night pressed close around me, I whispered into the darkness, "Who's there?" There was no answer, only a faint, almost imperceptible shift in the air, as if the room itself had exhaled. And somewhere deep in the shadows, I could swear I saw a pair of eyes glint, watching, waiting, knowing. And that was when I understood. My life, as I knew it, was over. The morning after the strange presence in my apartment, I woke with a lingering unease I couldn't shake. Sunlight streamed through the blinds as if nothing had happened, ordinary and comforting, yet the heaviness in the air remained. I dressed quickly, tried to make sense of the fear gnawing at the edges of my mind. Coffee. Routine. That had always been my anchor. But today, even the familiar smell of roasted beans didn't calm me. The streets were busier than usual, yet I felt as if the city itself had shifted. Shadows seemed darker along the edges of the sidewalks, flickering unnaturally, even though the sun was high. I thought I saw movement just beyond my line of sight, quick flashes between parked cars and alleyways, but each time I looked, nothing was there. A chill ran down my spine. Though the morning was warm. At work, I tried to focus, but the air felt off. My co-workers moved as usual, their laughter and chatter ordinary in every way. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching me. Papers shuffled. Typing keys clicked. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Still, I felt eyes tracking me, analyzing me, waiting for something I didn't understand. During lunch, I walked to the small park behind the office, hoping the sunlight and fresh air would clear my head. The trees rustled, leaves shimmering in a breeze that carried no scent of city smoke. I paused near a bench and noticed something odd. Faint marks on the bark of a tree, claw-like scratches that were too neat to be random. I knelt, touching the grooves with my fingers. They were fresh. I looked around, heart racing, but no one was there. Only the whisper of the wind through the branches. That night, returning home, the feeling of being watched intensified. Every step echoed differently in the hallways of my apartment building. Shadows lingered where they shouldn't, I thought. I heard soft murmurs behind closed doors, so soft I couldn't tell if it was my imagination. Yet they were persistent, rhythmic, like someone whispering my name. Though I had told no one where I lived, I tried to rationalize. Perhaps it was stress, the anticipation of my upcoming wedding, the anxiety of entering a world I barely knew. Perhaps the city itself played tricks on the mind. But my instinct, something I had learned to trust over years of living alone, told me that this was not imagination. Something had changed. Then came the encounters. The first was subtle. I stepped into the elevator one evening, pressing the button for my floor. The doors closed with a quiet hiss, and I realized I was not alone. A figure stood at the corner, tall, shoulders broad, hands tucked into pockets. I froze. The elevator was small, the lights dim, yet I could not make out a face. Just a shadow, almost like smoke, lingering in the corner. "You shouldn't be afraid," a voice said, soft, deep, and almost melodic. My pulse jumped. I spun around. No one. The elevator walls reflected only me. And yet the echo of the voice lingered, vibrating faintly in my chest, leaving me shaking. The doors opened and I hurried out. Glancing back, nothing. Just the reflection of myself, pale and nervous. The second encounter was even stranger. At the market a few days later, I noticed a figure standing too close behind me. Someone who never seemed to step forward or back, who mirrored my every movement like a shadow. I turned quickly. A man, or something like a man, stared at me. His eyes glowed faintly in the dim lighting, amber against the sunlit afternoon. I blinked. When I looked again, he was gone. Nothing remained but the rustle of bags and the hum of the city dot by the third encounter. I knew I couldn't ignore it. The world I had trusted, the streets, the buildings, the quiet routines, was fragile. It could shatter with a single brush of presence. That night, as I prepared for bed, I noticed something else. Faint scratches along the windowsill. Not deep, not violent, but deliberate, precise. As though something or someone had been observing me through the glass while I slept. My phone buzzed then. A single message appearing on the screen. "You are not safe. Watch closely." I dropped it in shock. No sender, no number. Just the words, stark and deliberate. My fingers shook as I reread them. I had no idea who or what was warning me. Sleep became a stranger. Every creak in the apartment felt like movement. Every shadow a living thing. I began leaving lights on, but the darkness still felt heavy in the corners, pressing in on me. My dreams, too, were haunted. I dreamt of tall figures standing at the edge of forests, of glowing eyes in empty streets, and of whispers curling around me like smoke, calling my name in voices I could not place. I would wake in a sweat, heart pounding, unable to convince myself it was only a dream. And then the incident happened. I had gone to the corner store, late, trying to distract myself from the tension coiling in my chest. On the walk back, the streets were empty, eerily silent. The lampposts flickered as I passed, throwing moving shadows across the pavement. I felt the presence again, closer this time. I froze, my breath caught. The street behind me seemed to bend, the air shimmering faintly. And then I heard it clearly, a growl, low and deliberate, vibrating through the night air. I turned, slowly, and there he was. Not a man exactly, not entirely human, but standing there as if he belonged to both worlds. His eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, amber and unyielding. I took a step back. Fear, primal and icy, gripped me. My instincts screamed to run, and yet I could not move. There was something magnetic, pulling me closer. as if my body remembered a connection it could not explain. He tilted his head, studying me as I shivered in the cool night. The growl softened, almost curious, and I realized that the world I had always known, the safe, ordinary life, had been replaced. The streets were no longer predictable. Shadows no longer hid only the city's corners. Something ancient, powerful, and alive had entered my life, and I could feel it waiting, watching, calculating. I ran the final block to my apartment, not daring to look back. My heart thundered in my chest. I bolted the door, pressed my back against it, and tried to calm my racing thoughts. The shadows outside pressed against the glass, unseen yet palpable. And then, just as I thought I was alone, a whisper drifted from the corner of the room. Not a sound I could attribute to the wind, not an echo of city noise, but a voice that made the blood in my veins turn cold. "You cannot hide anymore." I froze, knowing in that instant that my ordinary life was gone. Someone was now entwined with my destiny, and danger was no longer just a story in the shadows. It was real, it was close, and it had already found me. I never thought a single glance could stop time until that night. It began as an ordinary evening. I was in my apartment, trying to shake the lingering tension from the strange occurrences in the city. The air felt heavier than usual, the shadows stretching across the room as if reaching toward me. I was tense, alert, every sense alive, waiting for the faintest whisper of movement. I tried to convince myself it was paranoia, a reaction to weeks of unexplained events. That deep down I knew better. Something or someone was here. Then he appeared. I didn't hear him enter. There was no creak of the floorboards, no knock at the door. One moment I was alone, the next he was there. A presence so commanding it pulled at my very core. My chest tightened, breath caught. He was tall, broad-shouldered, moving with a fluid grace that seemed almost unnatural, as if every step had been measured centuries ago. His eyes, I cannot describe them adequately. Amber, piercing, glowing faintly in the dim light. They held a world of secrets, danger, and promises I didn't understand. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered, though my voice trembled. He tilted his head, a faint smirk curving his lips, and the air between us shifted. "And yet, here you are," he replied, low and deliberate, his voice vibrating through the room like a deep, resonant note. It wasn't threatening yet, it carried a weight I couldn't ignore. Every instinct in me screamed to run, to escape, and yet every fiber of my being wanted to step closer. I noticed the subtle details that made him otherworldly. The faint scent of something wild, earth and smoke, an echo of the forest at midnight. The way the shadows clung to him, almost revering him, and the quiet strength in his posture, a sense that he could bend the world to his will if he chose. "Who are you?" I asked, keeping my distance. "I'm someone who should have remained a shadow in your life," he said softly. And yet there was something magnetic, impossible to resist. Someone you cannot ignore. My pulse raced. Part of me was terrified. Part of me intrigued. He was danger wrapped in elegance. Mystery coiled in every movement. And somehow I knew that to step closer would be to step into a world I had no control over. "You shouldn't be here," I repeated, firmer this time, though my hands shook. "I could say the same," he murmured, taking a step forward. Not threatening, not cruel, just deliberate. He was a predator, yes, but not in the way that prey fears. He was a force of nature, a storm quietly gathering, and I was standing in the eye of it. Something shifted between us, a subtle energy that made the room feel smaller, more intimate. My body reacted in ways I could not name. Not fear, not desire, something in between. Curiosity, longing, fascination. It was the spark of a connection I had never felt before, raw and unexplainable. "Why are you here?" I asked again, voice barely above a whisper. "To watch. To see. To understand," he said. His gaze held mine, unblinking, intense, as though he could peer through my thoughts and read every secret I had tried to hide, even from myself. "You're not like the others. You won't run. You won't hide. That is rare." I swallowed hard, unsure whether to be flattered or frightened. I had never felt anyone look at me that way, not like this. There was a weight to his attention, a pressure that made my heart ache with curiosity. "I don't understand," I admitted, my voice trembling. "You will," he said. And though the words were simple, there was a promise in them that sent chills down my spine. A promise of discovery, of something forbidden yet profound. I wanted to step back. I wanted to retreat into the safety of my routine, the ordinary life I clung to. But I couldn't. The pull he exerted, it wasn't just magnetic. It was inevitable. I realized that my world had shifted the moment he stepped into it. I was no longer in control. My safety, my routines, my very sense of normalcy, they had been quietly dismantled. "You're dangerous," I said finally, my voice shaking with a mixture of fear and awe. "And you," he replied, taking another step, "are curious." His smirk softened just slightly, but his eyes never wavered. "Curiosity will save you, or destroy you." There was a pause, heavy and deliberate. I could feel his gaze pressing into me, penetrating the walls I had built around my life and my heart. And in that moment I understood. This was not just a meeting. It was a crossing of paths written long before either of us existed. Fate had brought us together, and neither of us could ignore it. I tried to focus on rational thought, on logic, on anything that could ground me. "I don't know what you want from me," I said, though my hands betrayed me, trembling against the edge of the countertop. "I don't know either," he admitted, voice softer, almost human now. "But I do know that you are important, more than anyone else will ever understand." His words struck a chord deep within me. I didn't understand why I felt it, why every nerve in my body hummed with tension and anticipation. But I did. I knew, instinctively, that this presence, this man, this being would change everything. That the life I thought I had would never exist again. That ordinary was gone. A sudden noise from the street below snapped me out of the moment. I blinked, and when I looked back, he had vanished. Just like that. No warning, no trace. Only the faint scent of earth and something wild lingering in the air. My heart pounded, my mind raced. I knew he hadn't simply left the room he had been. Somewhere else entirely, and yet his presence lingered as if it had embedded itself into the walls. I sank into a chair, trying to make sense of it. Who was he? Why had he come? Why did the very air seem charged with him, as though he had altered the space around me? Questions surged through me, yet none of them could prepare me for the truth I felt stirring deep inside. I had already been drawn to him. Not by desire, not yet, but by something older, something more powerful. A whisper of movement in the corner of the room made me start. I glanced up, half expecting him to be there again. But there was nothing. Still, I could feel him just beyond my sight, just beyond my understanding. Waiting, watching, knowing that this was only the beginning. And in that quiet, trembling moment I realized my ordinary life was over. The world I had trusted, the safe routines I had clung to, had been shattered by a presence I could neither ignore nor fully comprehend. Something dangerous, magnetic, and impossible to resist had entered my life, and I was helpless to turn away. The thought both terrified and thrilled me. And somewhere, In the dark corners of the city, I knew he would return. The days after our first encounter blurred the line between ordinary life and something I could not explain. I tried, desperately, to return to my routines, waking to the sun, walking the same streets, sipping my morning coffee with the same precise motions. But everything felt off. Small things began to unravel, subtle at first, almost imperceptible, yet impossible to ignore. It started at work. I had been filing papers in the quiet office when the lights flickered violently, plunging the room into brief darkness. My fingers froze on the stack of folders, and when the lights returned, the papers on my desk had shifted, lined up neatly in a formation I had not created. I blinked, convinced I was imagining it. Yet a chill ran down my spine, the same sensation I had felt when I first saw him. On the way home, the city seemed altered. I passed familiar streets, yet the air carried a whispering wind, faint but deliberate. Leaves twirled in spirals that defied the breeze. Shadows seemed to stretch toward me, not cast by buildings but by something unseen. I pressed my coat tighter, gripping the straps of my bag. But even as I walked faster, I could feel the pull an invisible current tugging at me, guiding me toward places I didn't want to go. Then came the visions. It happened during the quiet hours of the night. Lying in bed, trying to convince myself I was safe. The ceiling blurred, and suddenly I was elsewhere, or maybe seeing through another layer of reality. I glimpsed him standing in the center of a forest, moonlight brushing his shoulders, eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. He raised a hand, and shadows twisted around him like water. I couldn't move, couldn't call out. And yet, I understood somehow that he was not just watching me. He was connected to me, drawing me in. I awoke with a start, heart hammering, sweat clinging to my skin. The room was silent, ordinary, yet I could feel his presence lingering in the corners, teasing my senses. I tried to dismiss it. I told myself it was just a dream, a side effect of stress and my overactive imagination. But deep down, I knew better. The next day, coincidences began piling up, each more unnerving than the last. I was walking home when I noticed a stray cat staring at me from across the street. Its eyes unnaturally bright, almost golden. It followed me, weaving between parked cars and alleyways, never taking its gaze off me. When I finally reached my building and looked back, it vanished without a sound, without a trace. The chill returned, crawling along my spine. At the market, I nearly collided with a man who appeared out of nowhere. He was tall, dark-haired, his expression unreadable, yet something about him made my heart skip a beat. I stumbled, caught myself on the edge of a display, and when I looked up, he was gone. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a lingering sense that I had been watched, tested, even nudged by an unseen force. I began noticing the patterns, small things I had never questioned before. Streetlights flickering in sequence, shadows lingering where they shouldn't, whispers that seemed to rise from nowhere, curling around the edges of my mind. Each anomaly, each coincidence, pulled me closer to the truth I refused to face. The supernatural was real, and it was inescapable. I tried to resist. I told myself to focus on work, to keep my routines, to anchor myself in ordinary life. But the pull was relentless. Every corner I turned, every mirror I passed, I felt him, always him, just beyond my sight, watching, guiding, testing. The line between my life and his world was dissolving. And then came the first direct warning. I was returning home late. The city unusually quiet when I noticed the figure standing in the alley near my building. My heart froze. Not a dream. not a trick of light. He was real, his amber eyes glowing faintly in the dim street lamp. My instincts screamed to turn, to run, but my feet moved toward him anyway. I didn't understand why. I just moved. "You can't stay blind to it anymore," he said, voice low and controlled, vibrating through the night air. "The world you know is gone." I swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" I whispered, keeping my distance though the pull was undeniable. He stepped closer, and the shadows around him seemed to shift, as though the darkness itself was bending toward him. "You're part of it now," he said. "Part of something older than you can imagine. And it's already reaching for you." I felt a ripple in the air, a pressure against my chest, like gravity shifting around me. Panic surge. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the curb. His gaze followed me, unwavering, but not hostile. Curious, commanding, unavoidable. Then a sudden sound behind me made my blood run cold a low, guttural growl that didn't come from any animal I knew. I spun, and shadows along the alley walls twisted unnaturally, elongating, converging. My instincts screamed at me to run, yet my legs felt rooted. The growl grew louder, closer, and a sense of urgency gripped me. Before I could react, the wind shifted, carrying his voice again. "Move if you must, but understand you cannot escape." A figure emerged from the shadows, tall, lithe, moving with impossible speed. Its eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, and though it didn't attack, the intensity of its presence froze me in place. My chest tightened. I felt the air thrum with power, a warning that danger was near, that the ordinary world I had clung to was gone forever. Then, just as suddenly, the figure vanished, slipping back into the shadows as if it had never been there. My legs gave out beneath me. I sank to the pavement, breathing hard, heart hammering like a drum. The alley was silent again, ordinary at first glance, but the tension lingered, as though the air itself remembered. I stumbled home, keys trembling in my hands, locking the door behind me. Every instinct screamed that I wasn't safe, that something or someone was still out there, waiting. I leaned against the door, trying to calm my racing thoughts. The whispers had returned, soft but persistent, curling around the edges of my mind like smoke. And then I realized, in a cold, sudden clarity, no matter how hard I tried, the ordinary world I had known was gone. Every shadow, every whisper, every unexplainable event was pulling me deeper into a world I could neither ignore nor escape. The supernatural was no longer a possibility. It was reality, and it was coming for me. The next morning, I woke with the remnants of last night's tension still clinging to me like a second skin. Every shadow, every rustle of the wind outside my window made my heart jump. And yet, I couldn't stop thinking about him, about the way he had appeared so effortlessly, about the way his presence had shifted the air around me. I tried to convince myself that I was imagining things, that it was simply fear, excitement, confusion. But I knew, deep down, it was more than that. Something in him had reached into the core of me, touching a part I hadn't realized existed. A part that longed for connection, for understanding, for someone who could see me not as ordinary, not as a name on a contract, but as Emmy. By evening, I found myself walking toward the park where I had first seen him, or maybe it was where he had chosen to make his presence known to me again. I didn't know what drew me there, only that I felt a current in the air, subtle but undeniable. The leaves rustled, shadows shifted, and for a brief moment, I thought I imagined him standing among the trees, watching. And then he stepped out of the darkness, fluid, deliberate, yet somehow softer than I remembered. His amber eyes met mine, and I felt a jolt not of fear, but something warmer, something electric and unspoken. "You shouldn't be wandering alone," he said, voice low but not harsh. There was a gentle cadence now, a rhythm that seemed almost familiar. "I could say the same to you," I replied, trying to steady my racing heart. My voice was firmer than I felt. He tilted his head, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugging at his lips. "I suppose that depends on your definition of alone," he said. There was humor there, subtle, but it didn't erase the tension between us, the magnetic pull that made my chest tighten every time. He looked at me, Dot. We walked together in silence, the quiet broken only by the rustle of leaves beneath our feet. It was an ordinary evening in appearance, yet charged with unspoken questions. Every glance we exchanged carried weight. Every gesture a brush of hands as we passed a low-hanging branch. The way our steps unconsciously aligned felt like a conversation in itself. "I don't understand why I feel this." "Connection," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. The word surprised even me. I had never been one to speak openly about feelings, yet there was an honesty that demanded it. A force I could not resist. He stopped and looked at me fully, his gaze penetrating, almost tender in its intensity. "You're different," he said. "I've never met anyone who unsettles me and grounds me at the same time. You're unlike anyone I've known." I felt warmth rise to my cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from the depth of his attention. He was seeing me, truly seeing me, in a way that left me exposed yet safe. "You're dangerous," I said after a moment, half laughing, half serious. "And I don't even know your name." "I could tell you," he said, stepping closer, so that the shadows of the trees wrapped around us both. "But would you believe me if I did?" I shook my head. "Probably not." A silence settled over us, not uncomfortable but charged. It was a silence that spoke volumes. Acknowledgement of unspoken truths, recognition of forces larger than ourselves, and the quiet thrill of a bond forming against impossible odds. I realized then that I wanted to know him, not because I was safe, but because I was drawn to the danger and the mystery that surrounded him. We spent hours talking that night, or at least, I think we did. Time seemed to stretch, warped by the intensity of our connection. He shared fragments of his life, carefully measured, never fully revealing himself, yet giving enough to make me feel closer to him than I had ever felt to anyone. Every word, every glance, every subtle touch of his hand as he pointed to a star in the sky carried intimacy without crossing boundaries. It was clean, yet emotionally charged, a dance of trust and curiosity. "You make ordinary feel impossible to ignore," he said finally, almost to himself. I felt the same. The world I had known predictable, safe, ordinary felt fragile now, exposed to a force I could neither name nor resist. And yet, being near him, hearing his voice, feeling his presence, it was intoxicating in the purest sense. Just as I began to feel a sense of calm settle over me, the air shifted. A sudden gust of wind swept through the park, scattering leaves in chaotic spirals. My stomach dropped. It wasn't a natural wind. It carried a strange resonance, a subtle vibration that made the hair on my arms rise. He stiffened beside me, his amber eyes narrowing. "They're here," he murmured. The words were almost lost in the wind, yet they made my blood run cold. "They know you're connected to me." Before I could ask who, a shadow passed along the edge of the park, moving with speed and precision that no human could match. I gasped, stepping back instinctively, and for the first time I saw him fully not as the calm, enigmatic figure I had just been talking to, but as something more. Something powerful, something not entirely human. His form shifted subtly in the dim light, muscles coiling, senses alert. the shadows around him bending as if responding to his presence. I had no words. My chest tightened. My mind raced. The magnetic connection, the emotional bond we had been forming, suddenly collided with a stark, undeniable truth. He was not entirely of this world. And whatever he was, it was dangerous. He caught my gaze and softened, returning to the man who had walked beside me only moments ago. "Don't be afraid," he said gently. "I will protect you. But there are things you need to know, things you can't ignore." I nodded, heart pounding, though 1,000 questions swirled in my mind. I realized then that the bond between us was no longer just emotional. It was a tether, pulling me into his world whether I wanted it or not. And the events of tonight had shown me that his secrets ran deeper, darker, and more dangerous than I could have imagined. As he disappeared into the shadows once more, leaving me standing alone under the rustling trees, I knew two things with absolute certainty. I was drawn to him in ways I could not explain or resist. What he truly was, his hidden truth, would change everything about my life. And soon. And I was terrified. Yet, despite the fear, a part of me wanted to follow. The days that followed our encounter in the park were a blur of restless anticipation. I could no longer ignore the pull toward him. The magnetic force that had drawn me to the shadows of the city, to the quiet rustle of trees, to the very places where reality seemed to fray at the edges. Yet with that pull came fear, a deep, gnawing uncertainty I couldn't shake. I saw him again that night. The streets were quiet, the kind of silence that makes every sound sharp and every shadow threatening. I wasn't sure why I went to him, only that something inside me demanded it. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was the bond we had begun weaving in the park. Or perhaps it was foolishness, a dangerous craving for the unknown. He was waiting at the edge of the forest, his form almost blending with the shadows. But I could feel him. Every muscle, every breath, every heartbeat resonated through the air. When he noticed me, his amber eyes glimmered in the pale light of the street lamp. There was something different tonight, though I couldn't yet name it. "You came," he said softly, almost surprised. "I wasn't sure you would." "I couldn't stay away," I admitted, my voice trembling. The admission startled even me, but the intensity of our connection made it impossible to lie. He stepped closer, and I noticed subtle changes, small, almost imperceptible, but enough to make my pulse quicken. His skin seemed to catch the light differently, almost luminous, and the shadows around him moved in ways that defied the ordinary. His gaze sharpened, and there was an edge to him now. A quiet, coiled energy that spoke of strength and danger. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "Something you might not understand at first." I braced myself. "What is it?" He paused, studying me with an intensity that made my chest tighten. "I am not entirely like you," he admitted. "Not human. At least, not in the way you think of it." My stomach dropped. I had suspected as much, but hearing him say it aloud made it real. What do you mean?" I asked cautiously. "I am bound to something older, something primal," he said, his gaze piercing mine. "There are parts of me that exist in shadows, in places beyond your world. I can't fully control them, but I can control myself when I'm with you. That is why I stay close." I swallowed hard, trying to reconcile the man I had been drawn to, the one who had walked beside me, shared stories, laughed softly with this revelation. My mind raced with images of myths and legends, werewolves, vampires, cursed souls. And yet, there he stood, flesh and blood in front of me, speaking honestly enough to make me believe him without question. "You're a werewolf?" I whispered, though the word barely felt sufficient. He shook his head, a small, wry smile touching his lips. Not exactly. Not in the way stories tell it. But I am bound to forces you cannot yet comprehend. I shift, I change. I carry something ancient in me. That is why the shadows follow, why the wind whispers, why danger is always near. I step back, a shiver running down my spine. Fear mingled with fascination. He was dangerous, undeniably, irrevocably dangerous. But there was honesty in his eyes. An openness that drew me in despite my instincts screaming to flee. I don't know if I can trust this, I admitted, voice shaking. You're powerful. I don't know what you could do if you wanted to. I don't even know what you truly are. He reached out, his hand hovering near mine but not touching. Trust isn't given lightly, he said. I would never ask for it blindly. But know this, I have never harmed you. I will not. And I will protect you, even if it means putting myself at risk. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to reach out and take his hand, to feel the warmth, the grounding presence that had become my anchor in these shadowed days. And yet, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered caution. This world was unfamiliar. I had glimpsed only fragments, but fragments could be deceptive. I looked at him closely, taking in the details I hadn't noticed before. The faint glimmer of scales along his collarbone, barely visible under his shirt. The way his nails caught the light, sharper than normal. The subtle way his eyes seemed to shift in hue with the moonlight. Each detail was minor, but together they painted a picture that was both mesmerizing and terrifying. Why me? I asked, almost breathless. Why are you drawn to me? He tilted his head, amber eyes locking onto mine. Because you see me, truly see me. Not the monster, not the legend, not the danger. You see me, the part of me I guard, the part that craves something. Human, something real. You are rare, and you are important. I felt the pull again, stronger now, a magnetic tug that made my knees weak and my chest ache with unspoken longing. There was a bond forming between us, something beyond friendship, beyond understanding, beyond fear. It was emotional, intimate, and undeniably real, and yet, doubt lingered. I noticed it then, a shadow flickering behind him, moving against the wind, shifting in ways that didn't align with the ordinary. It was subtle, a peripheral movement, but enough to make my heart skip. I realized, with a sinking feeling, that there were things he had not told me, things he might never tell me. Is there something else? I asked, my voice low, cautious. He stiffened, just slightly. His amber gaze flicked toward the shadows behind him, then back to me. He hesitated, and the pause was enough to send a wave of unease through me. There are things you do not yet understand. Things I cannot reveal, not yet. I nodded, heart racing. I wanted to press, to demand honesty, but instinctively, I knew it would be met with silence or evasion. And yet the hesitation was enough. A seed of doubt took root in my mind. If he could withhold this much, what else was hidden? How much could I trust? The pull between us remained, undeniable, magnetic, intoxicating. I wanted to step closer, to lean into him, to feel the connection that had become so vital to me. But the shadows, the hesitation in his eyes, and the unspoken truths reminded me that this world was dangerous. That he was dangerous. That trust could be a fragile, fleeting thing in the presence of something so powerful. I turned to leave, my chest tight, mind racing, and as I walked away, I couldn't shake the image of that subtle shadow, slipping behind him, moving with purpose. A sense of foreboding settled over me. I had glimpsed the truth fragmented, tantalizing, terrifying, and it left me both fascinated and wary. He called after me, voice low but urgent. Be careful. The world is shifting, and your path is tied to mine now. I nodded without looking back, unsure whether I believed him entirely. My heart ached with longing, yet uncertainty gnawed at me. I realized with chilling clarity that the bond between us was no longer a choice. It was inevitable. And with that inevitability came fear, fascination, and a shadow of mistrust I couldn't ignore. As I reached my apartment and closed the door behind me, I whispered into the darkness, half to myself, half in warning. What are you hiding? And I had a feeling that the answer would change everything. I had thought the bond we shared, the quiet intimacy, the magnetic pull, the unspoken understanding was enough to shield me from the chaos outside. I was wrong. From the moment he revealed fragments of his nature, the world seemed to shift around me. Shadows lengthened, whispers became sharper, and there were moments when I could feel eyes on me that weren't human, or perhaps they were human, but touched by something darker. It started subtly. I would catch glimpses of people in corners of streets, lingering too long, vanishing before I could confront them. I would hear soft murmurs in the wind, words just beyond comprehension. And always, there was that sense of being observed, assessed, judged by forces I couldn't see. He told me to be careful, to trust my instincts, but he rarely stayed long in the daylight. I understood why. There were parts of his life, of his past, that were not safe to reveal. But every time I saw him, it was electric. Our conversations, small touches, lingering glances, they built a tension that was more intoxicating than fear. One evening, I returned home to find a single envelope on my doorstep. No return address. No indication of who had left it. My hands shook as I tore it open. Inside was a single photograph. Him, but different. He was standing in the shadows of a ruined building, flanked by figures I couldn't fully make out. Their eyes glimmered with intent, their postures sharp, dangerous. And there, at the bottom of the photo, a single word was scrawled in red ink. Beware. I dropped the envelope, heart hammering. The warning was clear. Someone or something was targeting him. Or perhaps me. I wasn't sure which was more terrifying. That night, he appeared at my window. I hadn't heard him enter, but there he was. Amber eyes glowing faintly, shadows clinging to him like a protective cloak. You found it, he said, voice low. His expression was unreadable. Concern, anger, something deeper I couldn't tell. What is this? I asked. Holding up the photograph, he took it from me with a swift, deliberate motion, studying it for only a moment before tucking it into his coat. Old rivals, he said finally, his jaw tight. Enemies from my past. People who think they can challenge me, or use you against me. I felt my stomach twist. Use me? Against you? He nodded. They know there is a bond between us, and they will exploit it if they can. You must understand. Staying close to me puts you in danger. More danger than you've ever known. Despite the warning, I could not step back. Every instinct in me screamed to run, to pull away, to protect myself from forces I could barely comprehend. And yet, every moment I spent near him, listening to his voice, feeling the warmth of his presence, pulled me closer. The bond was irresistible, a force stronger than reason. The next day, I began noticing patterns. Footsteps that mirrored my own. Shadows that lingered longer than natural. A sense that someone or something was always just beyond my vision. I tried to maintain my routines, to act as if nothing had changed, but the world had shifted. Ordinary life was no longer an option. That evening, I met him in the park, as if drawn by invisible threads. The moonlight painted the world in silver, highlighting the tension in his posture, the way his gaze constantly scanned the edges of the trees. I wanted to ask him why he hadn't warned me sooner, why he hadn't revealed the full scope of the dangers that lurked in the night. But his amber eyes held me in place, a silent demand that I trust, even if I could not fully understand. "They're coming," he said, almost more to himself than to me. "Soon." "Who?" I whispered, heart racing. "The ones who never forgive. The ones who never forget. They will try to take what is mine, or make you the leverage they need." I shivered, torn between fear and fascination. The connection between us was undeniable. My heart wanted to trust him completely, to step closer and surrender to the bond. But my mind screamed caution. I didn't know what I was walking into. I didn't know the full extent of his past, of the power he wielded, of the enemies who stalked him through shadows. He reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from my face. His fingers lingered for the briefest moment, a gesture intimate yet entirely safe, and I felt the pull of him more strongly than ever. My chest tightened. I wanted to stay, to reach for him, to let go of the fear and step fully into the bond we shared. But then a sound from the edge of the park froze me in place. Footsteps fast, deliberate, too coordinated to be random. Shadows shifted unnaturally, aligning toward the darkened path where we stood. "They're here," he whispered, eyes narrowing. The calm, collected aura he usually carried was replaced by something sharper, defensive, ready to act. I wanted to run. I wanted to take my instincts and flee into the city streets. But my legs didn't move. Part of me knew I could not leave him, could not abandon the connection we had formed, even if it meant stepping into danger. "You need to decide," he said, his voice barely audible above the wind. "You can step back, pull away, protect yourself from what's coming. Or you can stay. You can surrender to this, to destiny, to the bond between us. But know this: either choice changes everything." My heart pounded. I looked into his amber eyes and saw the truth. The danger was real. The pull between us was undeniable. And yet, stepping fully into the bond might mean risking everything I thought I knew about safety, about life, about myself. The footsteps drew closer. The shadows shifted more distinctly, revealing shapes in the darkness that moved with precision, with intent. I couldn't make out details, but the sense of threat was unmistakable. My chest tightened as adrenaline surged. And in that moment, suspended between fear and longing, between caution and desire, I realized that the choice would not wait. The night demanded an answer before I was ready to give one. I turned to him, searching his face for reassurance, for guidance, for a sign that we could survive what was coming. His expression was steady, commanding, yet there was something else beneath the surface. A quiet vulnerability, a trust in me that I was not sure I deserved. The wind swept through the park, rustling leaves, carrying with it a faint whisper that I could not fully understand. The shadows pressed closer. The decision loomed, and then I heard the faintest shift behind me, a presence that made every instinct in my body scream. I had a choice to make: pull away and preserve the ordinary life I still clung to, or surrender to destiny and step fully into the world he represented. A world of danger, mystery, an impossible connection. The footsteps stopped just beyond the edge of the clearing. The silhouettes lingered in the darkness, poised, waiting. My heart raced, and I realized with a chill I could not ignore. The moment to choose had come. Never imagined that the danger following him would reach into my own past. My life, once ordinary and predictable, had been torn open by shadows, whispers, and amber eyes. But I had always thought the mysteries belonged to him, the world of power, of ancient forces, of darkness barely contained. I was just a bystander, drawn unwillingly into the orbit of someone I couldn't resist. Until the day the letter arrived. It was small, sealed with wax, No sender name. Just an intricate emblem pressed into the crimson surface. A symbol I vaguely recognized, though I couldn't place it. Trembling, I broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of parchment, written in a careful, elegant hand. The blood remembers. The bond was always yours. Find the truth, or the world you know will crumble. I froze. The words felt like a spark against dry tinder, igniting something long buried in my memory. My heart pounded. The letter didn't make sense. What blood? What bond? Questions clawed at me, but I didn't have to wait long for answers. That night, drawn again to the edge of the city where shadows stretched unnaturally long, he appeared silent, imposing, yet calm. Amber eyes locking on mine, reading me as though the letter had already changed me. "You found it," he said softly, voice carrying a weight I hadn't noticed before. "It was meant for you. It's time you learned the truth." I stepped closer, curiosity overpowering fear. "What truth? What does this mean?" He glanced around, then leaned toward me. "Your life has been protected for a reason. Your family, your blood, is tied to something far older than you know. Something that cannot be ignored any longer." I blinked. My family? What could they possibly have to do with this? He took my hands in his, grounding me in a way that made the world outside the park feel like a distant echo. "You were part of a lineage older than the city itself. A line intertwined with forces beyond human comprehension. Werewolves, vampires, guardians. Your ancestors walked the shadowed paths you're only beginning to see. And you carry their legacy." I staggered back, shaking my head. "That's impossible. My parents were ordinary. I grew up ordinary. There's nothing supernatural in my life. Ordinary can be a mask," he said. "Sometimes it hides what is strongest. Sometimes it protects what is most vulnerable. You are a part of a prophecy, though you didn't know it, though no one told you. Your bloodline carries the key to balance, to power, to survival. And that is why you were drawn to me, why the bond exists." The weight of his words pressed against me, as if the night itself had grown heavier. A bond to him, to something ancient, to forces I didn't fully understand. It was overwhelming, and yet every fiber of me recognized it as truth. The shadows that had clung to me, the whispers, the danger, they weren't just random. They were calling me home. I struggled to breathe, heart racing. "A prophecy?" I whispered. "You mean me?" He nodded, amber eyes steady. "You have always been meant for this. Always." I wanted to step back, to retreat to the fragile safety of ignorance. And yet, I could not. Every instinct in me, the same instinct that had drawn me to him, that had pulled me toward the shadows, that had refused to let me run, urged me forward. Then, "What happens now?" I asked. My voice was small, trembling, but the question carried the weight of the world. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face with deliberate gentleness. "Now, you begin to understand who you are, and what you're capable of. But be warned, understanding comes with challenges, with enemies, with choices that will test everything you know about yourself, about trust, about love." A shiver ran through me. "Enemies? More danger?" "Always," he said softly, voice calm but resolute. "But you are not alone. You are tied to me, and the bond is stronger than the darkness outside. Stronger than fear." I nodded, though doubt still gnawed at me. Stronger than fear. Yet I could feel the shadows gathering, growing, waiting. If what he said was true, if my bloodline carried power and destiny, then the danger wasn't just around me. It was inside me. It had always been inside me, Dot. Then came the revelation that nearly shattered me completely. I glanced down at my hand. still holding his. There, faint but unmistakable, were markings, lines etched into my skin that hadn't been there before, glowing faintly in the moonlight. Symbols I didn't recognize. Symbols I had only seen in the margins of old books, in stories my parents had warned me to ignore. They pulsed in time with my heartbeat, and suddenly I felt a surge of something raw, something alive. What? What is happening? I whispered, staring in disbelief. He bent closer, voice almost a whisper. The bond is revealing itself. Your blood remembers, your lineage awakens. You are more powerful than you know, and the world will test that power before you can claim it. A cold gust of wind swept through the park, scattering leaves like whispers of warning. My chest tightened. I was not just caught in his world anymore. I was part of it, woven into the fabric of forces older than I could comprehend. And I realized, with a chilling certainty, that nothing about my life would ever be ordinary again. I stepped back, struggling to process everything, when my gaze fell upon him. For the first time, I saw fear, or at least a shadow of it, cross his amber eyes. Not fear of me, but fear for me. And that fear was terrifying in its own right. Before I could ask, a sound behind me made my blood run cold. A low, deliberate echo. Something moving in the shadows that should not exist. My pulse jumped and instinctively I clutched his arm. "We don't have much time," he said urgently. "You need to trust what you feel. Your bloodline, your destiny, it's all tied together. But there's something you need to see. Something you weren't meant to uncover yet." I followed him, heart pounding, shadows stretching around us. The night felt alive, almost sentient, and I realized that what I was about to learn could change everything. And then we reached the clearing. A figure stepped from the shadows, familiar, yet impossible. My breath caught. The face, the eyes, the bloodline I had always denied, the legacy I had never known. It was me, or rather, it was a reflection of who I might become, marked by the power I carried, intertwined with forces that I had only begun to glimpse. The symbols on my skin flared, the shadows bent toward it, and a voice, deep, echoing, almost impossibly old, whispered, "You are the key, but will you claim it, or be claimed?" I staggered back, chest tight, mind spinning. Every certainty I had about myself, about my life, about reality itself, shattered in that moment. And in that shattered clarity I understood. My fate, my identity, everything I thought I knew, was about to change forever. The revelation of my bloodline and the prophecy had shifted everything. I could feel it in the air around me, in the way shadows seemed to stretch longer, in the way the wind whispered through the trees like a secret meant only for me. Every familiar street, every ordinary corner of my world, felt fragile now, as if one misstep could collapse the boundary between what I knew and what I feared. He found me before dawn, as the first silver streaks of light touched the horizon. His amber eyes were alert, watchful, and I could sense the weight pressing down on him. He had seen the same shift in the world that I had, that he carried it differently, a constant tension, a readiness I could feel even from a distance. "You should not be here alone," he said, his voice low, though not unkind. "The balance is shifting faster than I anticipated. They are aware of the bond. And now, they may try to use it against you." I swallowed hard, gripping the sleeve of my coat. "I can handle it," I whispered, though I was far from certain. Every shadow, every flicker of movement in the street, felt charged with intent. And yet, despite fear gnawing at my chest, I could not deny the pull that drew me toward him. He stepped closer, the space between us electric, charged with a tension neither of us could fully name. I need you to trust me, he said. No matter what happens tonight, no matter what shadows come, you must remember the bond. I trust you, I said, though my voice wavered. And in saying it, I realized it was not only a promise, it was a lifeline. The connection between us had grown stronger since the night in the park, stronger since the revelation of my lineage. But with that strength came vulnerability. I could feel it, the way danger clung to us both, threatening to tear the fragile threads of trust we had built. The night drew on, and the city seemed to close around us. Shadows moved with purpose. Leaves rustled in unnatural patterns. And then, the first sign of intrusion appeared. A flicker of movement, just beyond the light of the street lamps, coordinated and deliberate. They're here, he murmured, amber eyes scanning the darkness. His hand brushed mine quick, protective, grounding, and a shiver ran through me. It was not fear alone that surged through me, but something far deeper. A recognition that whatever was coming could test us in ways neither of us were prepared for. The figures emerged slowly from the shadows. Not fully human, though not entirely monstrous either. Their forms shimmered at the edges, as if reality itself struggled to contain them. They did not attack, not yet. Instead, they circled, watching, waiting. I realized with a sinking heart that this was a test, a challenge, designed to force hesitation, doubt, or betrayal. Stay close, he said, voice firm. Do not let them separate us. Their goal is to exploit fear, to weaken the bond. I nodded, gripping his hand, the connection pulsing between us. I felt his strength flowing into me, a tether that grounded me even as the shadows pressed closer. And yet, even as we stood united, a pang of doubt gnawed at me. What if I failed? What if the bond, no matter how strong, was not enough to withstand the forces gathering in the darkness? One of the figures shifted, stepping forward. Its movement was unnatural, fluid, deliberate. Its eyes glimmered faintly with a strange light, and I realized with a start that it recognized the bond between us. That awareness alone made the air heavy with tension. He stepped in front of me instinctively, amber eyes locking with the figure. You will not harm her, he said firmly. Whatever your intent, you underestimate the bond you face. The figure paused, tilting its head, as though measuring the truth in his words. And then, without warning, it vanished into the shadows, leaving only an echo, a whisper of warning carried on the wind. The choice is coming. Will the bond endure? I exhaled shakily, my chest tight. The danger had not passed. It had only escalated. Whoever or whatever was watching us was patient, calculated, and aware of the delicate threads connecting us. And I realized, with a pang of fear, that this test was only the beginning. He turned to me then, a rare softness in his gaze. Do you understand what this means? He asked. They will try again. And again. The bond is our strength, but it is also the target. I think so, I admitted, though my mind raced. But how do we stop them? He shook his head. We don't. We survive them. We endure. And we trust. The words should have comforted me, but instead, a seed of unease took root. Trust is easy to speak of in safety. It is harder to maintain when shadows press in from all sides. And I realized that the bond that connected us, so powerful, so magnetic, was also a vulnerability. One misstep, one moment of doubt, could unravel everything. As we walked together, hands brushing occasionally, the city around us seemed to hum with unseen tension. Every corner, every alley, every shadow held the possibility of a threat. And yet, with him beside me, the fear was tempered by an undeniable connection, a reminder that we were stronger together, even if the night pressed its weight against us. Then, Just as we rounded a familiar corner, a chilling whisper carried across the street. I froze, heart racing as the words formed clearly in my mind. She is yours, but only until the bond breaks. I looked at him, eyes wide. He frowned, amber gaze scanning the edges of the street, and I could feel the gravity of the warning settle over us like a storm cloud. Whoever was out there knew about the bond. They understood the connection, and they intended to test it. My chest tightened. The pull between us, the magnetic force that had drawn me to him from the beginning, suddenly felt like both a lifeline and a chain. Could we endure the trials to come? Could the trust we had forged survive the manipulations of unseen enemies, of shadows, of forces we could barely comprehend? He stepped closer, voice low but firm. We cannot falter. The bond, it defines us. But you must understand every choice you make, every hesitation, every doubt. It can be used against us. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words. My heart longed to step fully into him, to surrender to the connection that had become my anchor. Yet fear and uncertainty pulled me back. And in that tension, I realized the truth. The greatest danger was not outside, not in shadows or whispers, but in the fragile trust that bound us together. The night deepened. The city held its breath, and I knew that soon, the next test would come. The choice would demand courage, clarity, and perhaps sacrifice. I glanced at him, amber eyes watching mine, and felt the undeniable pull, stronger than ever, urging me forward. But a single thought lingered, a shadow of doubt that chilled me to the bone. What if trusting him is the very thing that leads to our undoing? And as we stood together in the darkness, the first hints of dawn brushing the skyline, I understood the cruel truth. The night was far from over, the threats far from gone, and the bond that had become our lifeline could also be our greatest vulnerability. The wind whispered once more, carrying a single haunting promise. The choice is coming, and destiny waits for no one. The night was heavier than usual, thick with an almost tangible tension that pressed against my chest. Every shadow seemed to stretch farther, every whisper in the wind sharper. I could feel it in the streets, in the park where we had first met, in the corners of my apartment that had once been safe. The world had shifted, and there was no turning back. He appeared at my window again, silent and sure, the amber glow of his eyes cutting through the darkness. But this time, he carried a weight I hadn't felt before, a subtle edge of danger, of urgency, of a storm barely contained. "They're coming tonight," he said, voice low but steady. "And this time, it's not just a warning. They intend to test the bond, to break it if they can." I swallowed, trying to steady my racing heart. The bond had been our lifeline, our anchor in the shadows, the invisible thread pulling me toward him. But now, for the first time, I understood how fragile it could be. One misstep, one faltering instinct, and everything could unravel. I don't know if I can face them," I admitted, though the words felt weak against the weight of what was coming. "What if I fail? What if I'm not strong enough?" He reached for me, his hand firm, grounding me in a way that made the world feel momentarily safe. "You are stronger than you know. The bond is not just mine, it's ours. But tonight, you will need to choose. Safety or truth. Love or denial. Every instinct you have will be challenged." We moved through the city streets like shadows ourselves, alert to every sound, every movement, every flicker of light. And then we reached the clearing in the park where I had first felt the pull between us. There, the night seemed to pulse with expectation, the shadows bending unnaturally. Gathering with purpose, figures emerged from the darkness, not fully human, not fully anything I could recognize. Their presence was a challenge, a test designed to probe our bond, to push us to the edge of fear and desire. I could sense their intent not to harm, not to destroy, but to force a choice, to measure loyalty, to uncover weakness. "Stay close," he whispered, amber eyes scanning the edges of the clearing. "Do not let them separate us. Trust the bond. Trust me." I nodded, though doubt still clung like a cold weight. And then the first figure stepped forward, its form shifting, flickering like a flame caught in the wind. It spoke not in words, but in impressions, emotions that swept through me with unrelenting clarity. Fear, longing, temptation. A choice was being offered, though it was not clear by whom or why. He took my hand, grounding me again, and I felt the pull of the bond, strong and insistent. But even as it anchored me, I could sense a darker side of him emerging, a protective, almost feral edge that had not fully revealed itself before. His jaw tightened, his eyes glowing brighter, and I realized that he was as ready to confront danger as I was ready to be drawn into it. "You cannot falter," he said quietly. "Whatever happens, you must decide, and you must decide fast. The shadows will not wait." The figures shifted again, closer now, surrounding us. And then came the test, an illusion of separation. I suddenly felt his presence waver, as though he had been pulled away by forces beyond our control. Panic surged through me. My heart screamed to follow, to reach for him, but the shadows pressed closer, whispering temptations, doubts, fears. "Step back. Protect yourself. Do not risk everything for something uncertain." I hesitated. The pull to him was magnetic, irresistible, but the fear clawed at my mind. Every instinct told me to run, to preserve the fragile life I had before the shadows came. And yet, every pulse in my veins screamed to step forward, to reach for him, to trust the bond that had become my anchor. Then he appeared again, closer, fiercer, the amber glow in his eyes illuminating the darkness around us. "Now," he said, "choose. Do you trust the bond, or do you step away?" I froze, torn between the comfort of safety and the inevitability of the connection. My chest ached, every heartbeat echoing the tension between fear and desire, hesitation and surrender. The shadows pressed in, the figures circling, testing, measuring, as though they could sense the fracture in my resolve. I took a breath, steadying myself. "I trust you," I said aloud, voice trembling but resolute. "I trust the bond." The moment I spoke it, the shadows seemed to hesitate, as if acknowledging the choice. He reached for me again, hand clasping mine with strength and warmth, pulling me closer. The connection surged, vibrant, almost tangible, and I felt the fear recede, replaced by a fierce determination. But the test was not over. One figure stepped forward, larger, more distinct, its presence commanding attention. It whispered a name I had not heard before, a name tied to my past, to the secrets of my bloodline, to truths I had yet to understand. "You cannot escape your fate," it murmured, voice like wind through dead leaves. "And the bond is only the beginning." My chest tightened. The bond had not failed, but the consequences of my choice were immediately clear. The shadows had not been merely a test, they were a warning. Forces beyond our understanding were watching, measuring, waiting. And now, a new revelation loomed, one that would demand even more courage, even more trust, even more surrender. He tightened his grip on my hand, amber eyes locking with mine, fierce and protective. "Whatever happens next," he said, voice low and intense, "we face it together. But you must understand, the path from here may not keep us side by side." A chill ran through me. I realized, with sudden clarity, that the choice I had made, trusting the bond, was only the first step. The path ahead was uncertain, shadowed and fraught with tests I could not yet foresee. Separation, capture, revelation, any of these could come, and the bond alone might not shield us. And then, just as the first hints of dawn brushed the skyline, a movement in the darkness caught my eye. A figure, silent, swift, purposeful, emerged from the shadows, directly between us. I recognized it immediately. An enemy tied to his past, one whose presence had haunted him for years. Before I could react, it moved with impossible speed, and the world shifted in a heartbeat. My hand slipped from his. The bond throbbed, a warning, a cry, but the figure was already closing the distance. He lunged toward me instinctively, amber glow flaring, and the shadows around us twisted, almost sentient in their fury. My heart raced, my mind screamed, and I realized with absolute certainty the trial was only beginning. The danger was no longer distant, it was here, pressing in, threatening to break us apart at the very moment our bond had grown strongest. And then, in the blur of motion and shadow, the figure disappeared with a whisper. You cannot hide from destiny, or from the bond that binds you. I froze, breathless, hand reaching for him, only to find empty space. The world seemed suspended, a moment between heartbeats, and I understood with icy clarity. We were no longer safe, and the consequences of our choices were about to unfold in ways I could not yet imagine. The city held its breath. The shadows lingered, watchful, patient. And I realized, in that suspended moment of terror and longing, that everything, trust, love, destiny, the bond itself, was about to be tested like never before. The world felt hollow, as if a part of it had vanished with him. The park, the city streets, even the soft hum of the morning air, the bomb that had anchored me moments before now pulsed faintly, a heartbeat without its twin. My hand reached instinctively toward the space beside me, but it was empty. Thea pressed in like a living thing. He had been taken, pulled into the shadows, into the unknown, leaving only a whisper of warmth, a memory of amber eyes that had always kept me tethered. My chest ached with longing and panic, but there was no time for despair. Somewhere out there, the forces that had challenged us were waiting, and I knew the only way to reclaim him and to protect the bond was to step fully into the destiny that had been revealed to me. I remembered the symbols etched into my skin, glowing faintly beneath my clothes. Map of power I had yet to fully understand. They pulsed now with urgency, calling me forward, urging me to face the darkness without hesitation. I felt a surge of courage, tempered by fear, and I moved into the city streets, eyes scanning for the slightest disturbance, every sense alert. The shadows seemed alive. Figures flitted at the edges of my vision. Whispers curled around my ears, testing my resolve. And then I saw them, the figures who had been testing us, surrounding me now as if the world itself had conspired to create this crucible. Their presence was intimidating, not in physical threat, but in the certainty that they were measuring, judging, waiting for weakness. And I realized this was my trial. My greatest fear was not the shadows, not the unseen enemies, but losing him, losing the bond we had built, losing myself in the process. I drew a deep breath, letting the glow of my symbols guide me. The bond pulsed, faint but insistent, and I closed my eyes, reaching inward, feeling the connection that tied me to him. I am not afraid, I whispered aloud, though my voice trembled. I will not let the bond break. The shadows shifted, as if acknowledging my resolve. And then he appeared, not fully free, but partially visible through the flickering veil of darkness. A silhouette, amber eyes dimmed yet unmistakable. He had been caught in the force that had tested us, held apart from me by powers I could not yet understand. You're here, he said, voice low, strained but steady. You shouldn't have come alone. I had no choice, I said, moving closer, letting the bond guide me through the shifting shadows. I cannot lose you. Not now, not ever. He stepped toward me, but the shadows pressed in, testing, circling, threatening to separate us once more. And then came the ultimate challenge, an illusion of choice, designed to force me to falter. The shadows whispered temptations, doubts, fears. Leave him behind. Preserve yourself. Deny the bond. My heart screamed against it. Every instinct told me to resist, to reach for him, to trust the connection we had fought to protect. I closed my eyes, letting the memory of every touch, every shared glance, every heartbeat guide me. The bond pulsed stronger, surging through me like a river breaking free. I reached for him, and this time, the shadows could not hold me. They recoiled, dissolving like mist before the force of our connection. He met my hands with his own, and in that moment the world seemed to settle. The shadows withdrew, not vanquished but held at bay, acknowledging the strength of our bond. I could feel the pulse of his presence, steadying, grounding, returning the warmth I had feared lost. You've grown stronger, he said softly, amber eyes finally brightening. The bond, it's unbreakable because you chose it. I smiled, relief washing through me, though exhaustion weighed heavily. We chose it, I corrected. Together. And yet, the trial was not without cost. The shadows had left their mark, not physical but emotional, a reminder of the vulnerability inherent in love and trust. Every choice we had made, every fear we had faced, had tested us to the limits. I realized how fragile the connection could have been, how easily fear could have undone everything. And yet, here we were, stronger for it. He stepped closer, brushing a loose strand of hair from my face. There's more to learn, he said, voice low, almost reverent. The bond will guide us, but the world, it is not yet safe. You are awakening, and with that comes responsibility. I nodded, understanding. My lineage, the prophecy, the ancient connection, all of it was more than a story, more than destiny. It was a call to courage, to resilience, to love that endured beyond fear. And I realized, as we stood together amidst the lingering echoes of shadows, that the bond was not just a tether, it was a choice we made again and again, with every heartbeat, every step, every challenge. A faint wind stirred, carrying with it the whispers of those who had tested us, acknowledging our victory, even if silently. The immediate danger had passed, but the world remained vast, unpredictable, and shadowed. And in that realization, I felt both fear and exhilaration. The journey was far from over. He took my hand, amber eyes steady, fierce yet tender. Whatever comes next, he said, we face it together. That is the power of the bond. That is the truth of our connection. I felt the warmth of it surge through me, steady, unshakable. Together, I echoed, feeling strength return with every pulse of the bond. The fear that had gripped me earlier faded into resolve. I had confronted my greatest fear, losing him, losing myself, and emerged stronger, tempered by trust and courage. And yet, as we stepped from the clearing, the faint glow of dawn brushing the horizon, I knew the immediate aftermath would bring new challenges. The shadows had receded, but they would return. The bond had endured, but the journey was far from over. And somewhere, just beyond sight, forces still watched, still waited, still tested. I glanced at him, amber eyes meeting mine, and realized the truth. Love, courage, and destiny were not about avoiding danger. They were about facing it together, choosing trust over fear, and stepping forward even when the path was uncertain. The park was silent now, the shadows lingering at the edges but powerless against what we had built. And in that quiet I felt the first hint of transformation, not just within the bond, but within myself. I was no longer merely the ordinary woman I had been. I was part of something larger, something eternal, something I had only begun to understand. The trial was over. The crucible had tested us. We had survived. But even as we embraced, even as the bond pulsed strong and unwavering, I could feel the world beyond stirring once more. Danger, challenge, destiny, they were not gone. They were only waiting for the next step. And for the first time, I understood fully that the bond we shared was not just a connection. It was a promise, a shield, and a challenge all at once. And we would meet it together. The first rays of dawn painted the city in soft gold, washing away the night's tension but not its memory. The air was calm now, almost serene, yet I could feel the lingering pulse of the bond between us, steady and unbroken. The trials of the past day's shadows, whispers, impossible choices, tests of courage and trust had left their mark, but they had not broken us. Instead, they had shaped us, strengthened us, and revealed truths I had never dared imagine. He stood beside me, quiet, still alert even in the fragile morning light. His amber eyes softened as they met mine, and I felt a warmth that went beyond simple relief. It was the deep, steady recognition of a connection that had been forged in fire and shadow, tested, strained, and proven unbreakable. We made it, I said softly, almost in disbelief. We survived. He shook his head slightly, a wry smile tugging at his lips. We did more than survive. We endured. We grew. The bond. It isn't just protection or connection. It's a choice we made every step of the way, and it will guide us through whatever comes next. I looked down at my hands, still tingling faintly with the residue of the symbols etched in my bloodline. A reminder of the power and responsibility I carried. The fear that had gripped me in the darkness. The fear of losing him, of failing the bond, of facing a destiny I did not understand had transformed into something else. Courage, clarity, and quiet certainty. I never thought I could face it all, I admitted. The shadows, the whispers, the danger, but with you, I wasn't afraid. He stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from my face. That fear was always meant to guide you, not control you. You learned to trust yourself, to trust the bond, and to step forward even when the world seemed impossible. That's what changed everything. That's what makes you extraordinary. I swallowed, feeling the weight of his words sink deep into me. Extraordinary. That was not a title I had ever imagined for myself. I had been ordinary once, tethered to a life of predictability, unaware of the depth of my own bloodline, the legacy of power and destiny that ran through me. But now I understood. I had been awakened, tested, and transformed. And in that transformation, I had discovered the truth of love, courage, and choice. We walked together through the park, the early morning light spilling over paths we had once navigated in fear. Each step was calm, deliberate, yet carried the memory of nights filled with uncertainty and peril. I could still feel the echoes of the challenges, the whispers of those who had sought to test us, but they no longer frightened me. We had faced them, endured them, and emerged stronger on the other side. You changed, he said quietly, voice full of reverence. Not just the bond, but you. Yourself. You've become someone who can face anything. Someone who can shape destiny, instead of being shaped by it. I glanced up at him, amber eyes meeting mine with unwavering intensity. And you? I asked. You've changed too. I can see it in the way you let me choose, in the way you trusted me, in the way you allowed yourself to care." He smiled, that rare softness I had come to treasure. "I have learned that love isn't just protection or control. It's partnership, trust, the courage to let someone step into the light beside you, even when danger still lurks in the shadows. You taught me that." We paused near the edge of the park, the city stretching out before us, bathed in the quiet gold of morning. The trials, the whispers, the tests of loyalty and courage, they had all led to this moment, this fragile peace after a storm of shadows. I took a deep breath, feeling the full weight of what we had endured, and allowed myself to reflect. The bond had been tested, and so had we. We had faced fear, deception, illusions, and the weight of destiny itself. But through it all, we had chosen each other, chosen trust, and chosen to step forward together. That choice had changed everything. "You know," I said, voice soft, "I've lost things along the way. Nights of certainty, the illusion of safety, the simplicity of who I was before all this. But I've gained everything else, courage, strength, and you." He drew me closer, hands resting gently on my shoulders. "And I've gained you," he said, voice low, earnest. "Even in the shadows, even in danger, I've never felt more alive than in the bond we share. Whatever comes next, we face it together." I smiled, feeling the full weight of the moment, the emotions that had been restrained through fear and trials now flooding freely. "Together," I echoed, letting the word carry both promise and certainty. The sun climbed higher, spilling light across the city. The shadows had not vanished completely, some lingered, reminders that the world remained vast, unpredictable, and filled with forces beyond comprehension. But the fear they had once inspired was gone, replaced by confidence in the bond, in each other, and in the choices we had made. He leaned close, amber eyes warm and steady. "No matter what comes, remember this. You are no longer just part of the ordinary world. You are part of something extraordinary. The bond, your bloodline, your courage, it is a force the shadows cannot break." I nodded, letting the truth of it settle deep into my heart. I had been ordinary once, but the trials had shown me what I could endure, what I could love, and what I could become. The bond had tested us, shaped us, and now it stood unbroken, a living testament to trust, courage, and the power of choice. And in that moment, I understood fully. Love was not a fragile thing to protect or hide. It was a force of its own, strong enough to withstand shadows, trials, and even destiny itself. And I had found it fearless, unwavering, and boundless in him, in us. In the bond we had chosen again and again. He took my hand, intertwining fingers, and I felt the steady pulse of the connection that had carried us through every shadow, every test, every fear. It was ours, forged through trust and trials, unbreakable, eternal dot as we stood together. Watching the city awaken, I knew that our journey was far from over. But for the first time, I was not afraid. Whatever challenges awaited, whatever shadows lingered, we would face them side by side. And in that certainty, I felt the profound peace of victory, not over others, but over fear, doubt, and the limits we had once believed bound us. I looked up at him one last time. Amber eyes warm, steady, and unwavering. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything, for trusting me, for letting me trust you, for the bond." He smiled, a mixture of pride, relief, and unspoken emotion. "The bond, it's ours, always, and I promise we will never let it falter again." I leaned into him, the warmth and certainty of the moment wrapping around me like a shield. The trials, the dangers, the shadows, they were behind us, their lessons carried forward in strength and love. And in that final, golden morning, I understood fully that what we had gained was far greater than anything we had lost. The city stretched before us, filled with possibility, sunlight, and the quiet magic of a world we had claimed together. And as we stepped forward, hand in hand, the bond pulsed, strong and eternal, a testament to courage, love, and destiny chosen freely. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly at home in the world, in the bond and in his presence.